fighting, I'm talking about, fisticuffs. Used to be a lot more, I don't want to say socially acceptable, but it was kind of understood, especially with young men. Young men were going to fight. And that's just the way it was. And now the mainstream narrative would have you believe that all fights are bad. There is no good reason to fight, ever. And nothing is resolved by fighting. The trouble with that is, a lot of it just ain't so. Over the course of my time, I've known some guys that were pretty good at dishing out the old summer teeth, Some are here, some are there, by the time you get done. I worked with a guy, he was my boss actually, and man, that guy had been in some scraps. He had puncture wounds in his back from knives. His knuckles were all gnarled up. My Uncle Joe could throw hands pretty good. He he snuck out of he was in the Navy. He snuck out of the naval base one night without permission, visited the local bar, and came back and got caught by a couple of MPs coming back on base. And he threw them both a beating and went to bed. And that didn't end well for him. I think I witnessed a lot of the fist fights I was witness to in my life was probably junior high, some in high school, yeah. But, grade school is not a lot of damage done generally. Junior high is a lot of fighting. That probably comes with the increased testosterone, and everybody's trying to kind of figure out who they are, and they're going to establish themselves and all that rigmarole. There's a lot of fighting in junior high. And I don't mean to glamorize it, even though Hollywood gets away with it. The government gets away with it. I mean, the government's been in military conflict well over the 200-year mark of their 230-year existence or something like that. We've been in armed conflict. Well, fighting doesn't solve anything. Why are we always in conflict now? What's going on over there with the Russians in Ukraine? Aren't they fighting? Well, a larger scale, sure. The fight is still a fight. I'm still not glamorizing it. I don't think it's a good idea, and there's a lot of things can go south real quick for you. We'll get back to that. What we're seeing now in society is the vast majority of people that have not been allowed to fight. I don't know the ins and outs of it, admittedly, but my understanding is now if you're in a serious fight, the police are called in. There's damages filed and lawsuits, and I mean, it can go south for you pretty quick. I've worked with some guys over the years that got into pickles of legal trouble over fist fighting. Usually a girl was at the source of that. I'm just saying. But that might be a reoccurring theme that you see here. But, okay, well, you watch it in the movies, and the good guy lays out the bad guy, and he just falls over with one punch, which actually is possible. I've seen it happen, but that's another story. But anyway, and in the movies, he drops him with one punch, and then there's another guy, and he gets laid out with another punch. Not very likely that happens. What they don't show you is the next day when his hands are so swollen that you can't make a fist even. Average fist fight's going to last you roughly, and there's exceptions obviously, roughly within 2 minutes it's done and over with. Unless you have very skilled, somewhat equal combatants. And then there's no telling. And again, I don't want to glamorize this because it shouldn't be. But you're seeing a society now that, by and large, has never been in a fist fight in their life. And you see it in their actions. You're seeing clips now of people in fast food restaurants because their order got wrong and they're throwing the food and screaming obscenities and carrying on. That just wouldn't fly back when I was a younger man. Somebody would line your wheels for you, and rightfully so. I mean, there's a way that you should act within society that everybody kind of agrees is this unwritten code, you know, to where we can all function productively. There wasn't any of this flying off the handle business and just getting plumb sideways. Another thing to keep in mind, hopefully somebody told you along the way, is that the toughest, baddest, fightingest guy that you ever knew, whether you're him or you knew him, there was always going to be somebody, somewhere, bigger, stronger, tougher, faster, or just a better fighter. Nobody goes unscathed unless you're extremely fortunate. Is it Jocko Willink? Is that the correct pronunciation? He's an ex-Marine or Navy SEAL, I think. And his whole thing to this day is, you know, you can see conflict coming sometimes, and the best thing to do is avoid it at all costs. And that, in this society, for almost all applications, that's probably true. And if that means in the scenario he raised, you know, go to the other side of the street to ignore it if you see it coming your way, and just keep on walking. The mouth is going to run. You just keep head down, keep on walking. Younger guys see this as, oh, you sissy, are you? Is that, you know? And then it's really, and that's a tough ordeal in school. I took some bullying, probably 7th grade, I think. Took a lot of mouth, and I was just a skinny, skin and bone, scrawny kid. And it wasn't until probably 9th grade that I started fighting back, and then the tables turned a little bit. But the thing to remember is that things can go south for you. You can be taking names and just dishing it out and trip over a curb and break your arm. Or somebody has a knife. I went to school with a guy, a little bitty short guy, and he was in boxing, grew up in actual gymnasium boxing with gloves and stuff. Was pretty accomplished for his weight class. He did some time in prison, kind of grew up with a rough crowd. And he had gotten his life turned around while he was in prison, amazingly. He was in there for, I think, 2 years or something like that. And when he came out, he was at a club, and it was, I think, 3-on-1. And he jumped in to help the one guy. Well, they had knives, and that cost him his life. And I knew that guy. I never had any problem with him. We played baseball together and got along fine. But then he died at a young age. I think he was 22. And that was the end of him. You don't know what can happen, and anything can happen in a fight. The part I'm seeing with society now, though, at least here in the West, America, is that kids are not being allowed to get out a lot of that aggression. And it just builds and builds and builds. The next thing you know, you have kids bringing the cordless hole punch to school, and that is not acceptable or good for anybody. Wouldn't it have been better in hindsight then, if that was that case for the particular circumstance, to just let them duke it out on the playground? And a lot of the guys that I knew that would get into scuffles with each other, there was a respect kind of gained there between both parties, it seemed like. And sometimes they became friends, but there was always the, like, yeah, how you doing? Yeah, you know, they might grumble or something, but it was done then. It was laid to rest. And whatever happened in the fight happened. Maybe one guy won, maybe one guy lost. Maybe neither one of them. I saw a few of those where they just tired themselves out and then sit and cussed each other verbally for a little bit. But that was the end of it. That was it. It was done, and then it was over. So when you're not allowed that release of aggression, well, then what happens? And again, I'm not advocating for fighting. I'm an old man now, man. I'm not interested in fighting anybody. I mean, self-defense, like, home intrusion, I'll fight. But even then, I got other ways that, we don't have to necessarily come to blows. It's not that I'm scared. It's just that there's some payment of dues, even by the winner, in a fight. But for society to claim that nobody wins a fight, ever, I'm not so sure that's correct. And I'm not so sure that a lot of what ails this country now doesn't stem from no bullying. There's legislation in most states. They take it seriously. There will be no bullying. Well, there is. We know that there is. To catch them and to prove it and then file your charges, that's a different world than what I came up in. I don't even know how to react to that. But I do know that kids being allowed to work out their aggressions and their frustrations to a certain degree, it maybe isn't the worst thing that could ever happen. Again, the flip side of that coin is that things can go south. And that happens more the older you get. The muscles get bigger, the blows get harder, people have died. Now you've got a murder on your hands. That's never good. I mean, I laugh, but it isn't funny. Or someone gets seriously damaged, potentially for life. I worked with a different guy, Indian Al. And then again, there was a girl at the root cause of it. Imagine that. Well, he got in an altercation with another guy who was interested in this girl. Indian Al could tangle it up pretty good. And he was holding the guy down and had him in a headlock and was thumping the side of his head in for him. And the guy bit his finger. And I mean, like almost tore the finger off. Injun Al, quote unquote, won the fight, and he just about died. He was in the hospital for about a week and a half with a bacterial infection from the bite. You don't know what could happen, because anything could happen, like I said. I don't know. But I do know that to flat out say that there is no excuse ever for fighting, well, the police fight when they have to. Someone's just out of control and they have to move, then they're going to fight. Well, then that's a reason for fighting. It's that or end them. That is no good. You have kids that are picked on and picked on and picked on and picked on, and sometimes they end themselves. That's no good. There's got to be a line somewhere, a fine line. I know. And I don't know, I'm not the one to say where one argument stops and the other one starts. But I know that the way we've gone about it isn't totally correct. Make of that what you will. Love to hear your comments on it, or your thoughts, and maybe some ideas that I haven't heard of. You can do the like and the subscribe thing if you haven't already. If you have, I appreciate that. Thank you. And we'll see you next time.